Hello, class. Welcome to Superhero Seminary. I'm Professor Murdoch. You may know me by a few other names, though. Daredevil, Devil of Hell's Kitchen, Matthew, Matt. And that's what I want to talk to you about today. Devil names. How many of you have heard that the devil's name was once Lucifer? How many of you have heard that he was once the most beautiful of archangels and even the heavenly choir director, and that at some point in the primordial past, he led a rebellion against God and was cast down to earth, where he later appeared in Eden to tempt Eve as the serpent? How many of you can find that story in the Bible? Well, there's good reason for this. It's not in the Bible. Yep, all of what I just said comes from various bits and pieces of non-biblical Jewish and Christian folklore throughout the centuries that was ultimately popularized by Milton in the 1600s in Paradise Lost. But wait. Didn't Jesus refer to Satan and his fall in Luke 10? Well, indeed he did. But it wasn't in some primordial past. Read the text. It was in response to the gospel proclamation ministry of the 72 disciples he sent throughout Galilee. And on top of that, he was actually quoting from Isaiah 14, which we're going to look at now, because that's where the mix-up happened and where the notion of Lucifer as a name for Satan came from to begin with. Here's how Isaiah 14 reads in the NIV. How you have fallen from heaven, O morning star, son of the dawn. You have been cast down to the earth, you who once laid low the nations. You said in your heart, I will ascend to heaven. I will raise my throne above the stars of God. I will sit enthroned on the mount of assembly, on the utmost heights of the sacred mountain. I will ascend above the tops of the clouds. I will make myself like the Most High. But you are brought down to the grave, to the depths of the pit. You see that first part? O morning star, son of the dawn. In Hebrew, it says Hallel, son of Shachar. Hallel means something like shining one, and Shachar means something like dawn. And we know from Ugaritic texts, like the myth of Shachar and Shalom, that these were the names of Canaanite deities as well, interestingly. Shachar was one of the sons of El. So this title had lofty mythical connotations, even in Isaiah's day. When the Hebrew Bible was translated into Greek, before the time of Jesus, the phrase was rendered Eosphoros, and Hallel or Eosphoros was used to refer to the brightest star in the morning, what we know of as the planet Venus. Centuries later, when the Hebrew Bible was translated into Latin, the term for Venus, which meant something like light bearer, was used. And what was that Latin term? You guessed it, Lucifer. So Satan's name was Lucifer or Eosphoros or Hallel before he was booted out of heaven. Well, not so fast. Allow this blind crime fighter / part-time Bible teacher to challenge you to look closely at the text. What does Isaiah say at the beginning of this poetic prophetic passage? Look at verse 3. It's right there in black and white. Verse 3, on the day the Lord gives you relief from suffering and turmoil and cruel bondage, you will take up this taunt against the king of Babylon. How the oppressor has come to an end, how his fury has ended. See, this entire passage is talking about a pompous, self-aggrandizing, evil pagan king who fancied himself as divine. We know it's talking about a pagan king because, again, look at what Isaiah says right after the famous Lucifer section. Verse 16, those who see you stare at you. They ponder your fate. Is this the man who shook the earth and made kingdoms tremble? The man who made the world a desert? Who overthrew its cities and would not let his captives go home? This passage is a prophetic taunt against the king of Babylon, though which specific king is up for debate, as he's never named, and likely intentionally given his penchant for self-glorification. Where did the idea that it's referring to a fallen angel named Lucifer come from? Well, in large part from later Latin-speaking Christians in the western part of the Roman Empire. For example, Origen seems to have missed the hyperbolic nature of Isaiah's song when he said, no human being is said to have, quote, fallen from heaven, or to have been Lucifer, or one who arose every morning. And Jerome linked this taunt against the king of Babylon with Ezekiel's taunt against the king of Tyre in Ezekiel 28, and Obadiah's taunt in Obadiah 4, and says, Lucifer fell, Lucifer who used to rise at dawn, and he who was raised in a paradise of delight had the well-earned sentence passed upon him. And he goes on to cite Obadiah 4. Other Western interpreters, such as Eusebius, Ambrose, and Augustine, followed this line of thinking. However, even Augustine recognized that Isaiah was speaking primarily of the Babylonian king. Look what he says. What is said in Isaiah and the other statements in that context that speak of the king of Babylon are, of course, to be understood of the devil. Well, are they, Augustine? See, Greek-speaking interpreters in the East, who weren't really influenced by the Latin translation, recognize this passage for what it is. John Chrysostom says, hear what the prophet says of a barbarian king when seized with this frenzy. I will exalt my throne above the stars of heaven, and I will be like unto the Most High. And Aphrahad, a Persian Christian in the 3rd century, says, now Nebuchadnezzar said, I will ascend to heaven and exalt my throne above the stars of God and sit in the lofty mountains that are in the borders of the north. Isaiah said concerning him, say they knew that Isaiah was talking about the king of Babylon. Aphrahad just assumed that it was Nebuchadnezzar, even though the text doesn't name it. So if Isaiah and Ezekiel and Obadiah were all talking about human empires or pagan kings, Why do they use such seemingly supernatural or heavenly language? Well, as my dear colleague Mr. T shared in the last episode of Superhero Seminary, the prophets, including Jesus, frequently used hyperbole in order to emphasize a point and provide striking, memorable imagery. The people in Isaiah's day were quite familiar with various myths and legends of pagan gods seeking to usurp the power of a higher god and being cast down in humiliation. This is a universal story. Everybody's heard of examples like this in their literature and myths throughout the world. And they were also familiar with the daily rise of the bright morning star that appears first and seems to dominate the entire dawn until the actual sun appears and utterly overtakes it in brilliance till it's no longer visible at all. This is exactly what Isaiah is saying will be the fate of Babylon's king when the true king of the universe renders his righteous judgment. As Hebrew Bible scholar John Goldengate puts it, Babylonian and Canaanite stories spoke of a god who tried to take over the power of the highest god. And the poem here turns such stories into a parable of what the Babylonian king is doing in presuming to exercise godlike authority, force, and prestige, and that over the whole world. He will collapse as readily as does Venus, the morning star, when it falls each day from the height of the sky. This is likewise what Ezekiel is doing in his prophecy about the impending fall of Tyre, another self-aggrandizing, wealthy, opulent, worldly power, by sarcastically comparing the king of Tyre to an angelic, Edenic, priestly being who was given everything, but became corrupt through greed and exploitation of others and will soon be cast down and destroyed. You can read all about that in Ezekiel chapter 28. When it comes to Satan's origin, before his appearance in Eden through the serpent, the Bible's simply silent, so we should probably be as well. Well, why then does Jesus quote Isaiah when the disciples tell him about the authority they're having over the demons during their preaching throughout Galilee? In writing about Jesus' use of Isaiah, my friend and esteemed New Testament scholar Ben Witherington puts it this way. Israelites were, by and large, not a myth-making people. They borrowed material from ancient Near East mythology, but they demythologized it and applied it to human figures, like the king of Babylon. Jesus takes the same approach and applies it to an all-too-familiar city, Capernaum, which is castigated as being as bad as Sodom or Tyre. You can read about this in Luke chapter 10. Those who are receiving Jesus' message are experiencing the humiliating defeat not of a particular worldly tyrant, but rather the one who is behind all worldly tyrants. Satan, like the kings of Babylon and Tyre centuries before, is now on the receiving end of God's judgment, and his empire, like theirs, is crumbling before the disciples' eyes. Those who embrace this message are living in the age to come. Those, like the towns Jesus is rebuking, who reject it, are going the way of Babylon, Tyre, Sodom, Gomorrah. This is the message of the, quote, Lucifer passage, and Jesus is quoting from it. It's not telling us anything about Satan's origin, but it's telling us a lot about Satan's destiny. Heck, even a blind man can see this. I'm Professor Murdoch saying so long, keep studying, and I hope to see you again here at Superhero Seminary. Wink, wink. If you like these courses, do us a huge favor and hit the like and subscribe buttons. Check out the other sessions of Superhero Seminary at the links on your screen. And if you want to share this video with others on your social media feeds, that is most appreciated. If you really want to help us, Disciple Dojo is a full 501c3 nonprofit teaching and outreach ministry that relies on monthly donors to make all our content available absolutely free. We would love for you to consider partnering with us, even if it's just a few bucks a month. For more information on how you can, see the links in the description.